Over the course of the pandemic, we have seen different variants of the virus emerge. Dr. Pam Hudson, who is the CEO of Crestwood Medical Center, helped break down and explain those different strains.
A variant is nothing more than the same old coronavirus that has experienced some mutations. The viruses mutate all the time. That's how they are successful and avoid the host being able to fight against them. There are 4 different kinds of variants with respect to the COVID virus right now. The first is a variant of no consequence. That means the mutations that are ongoing have nothing to do with how well the virus can be transmitted or how well it responds to medicines or whether it's impacted by the vaccine. So you won't hear likely about those in casual conversation. The next is a variant of interest. And those are variations or variants and mutations that have the ability to impact transmissibility, how susceptible they are to vaccine, and other types of treatments. Examples of these variants of interest are the 2 New York strains and Brazil. And from my listening to the news, I don't hear much about them. The reason is that they are variants of interest. The next level is a variant of concern. These are the ones that we're hearing about now. The UK variant, the 2 California variants, and also South African. These viruses have mutated and they have the genetic markers that indicate with some evidence now, so there's some science behind the fact that the transmissibility is improved with these, or their resistance to the medications is a little bit more concerning, or has the potential to be more severe. But the difference here from the others that I mentioned is that there's some evidence that this is something we need to worry about. And the last, and the one that I hope we never hear about, is the variant of high consequence. And those are the ones that there is significant impact on the infectiveness or contagibility of the virus, and the transmissibility is much higher. There currently are no variants of high consequence known to science at this point in time.